When you look at a blueprint for a massive, towering skyscraper, the true beauty isn't actually in the heavy steel beams or, the shiny glass windows themselves.
Right, it's never about the surface stuff.
Exactly. It's in the geometry. It's the way tension and compression perfectly balance each other out in the background, ensuring that the whole thing doesn't just, collapse into a pile of rubble.
Which is the part nobody really pays attention to.
Exactly. Everyone seems to completely forget about the blueprint. And you look at a 1-0 football match, specifically a largely forgotten 2018 World Cup group stage clash between Uruguay and Saudi Arabia, and it is incredibly easy to call it dull.
Oh, totally. People see a 1-0 scoreline and just assume nothing happened.
Right. If there aren't constant fireworks, people just see a lack of explosions and dismiss it as a boring, unremarkable building. But you'd be dead wrong.
Yeah, you really would be. They mistake a lack of chaos for a lack of design, which is a huge error in judgment.
Yeah, and if you know how to read the blueprint, you are actually looking at a masterclass in tactical deception. And not just that, but a really gritty tale of a global villain's redemption and high above the stadium, a broadcast booth that was quietly making history. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us as we unpack all of this.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into this one. Because when you look closely at this exact match, you start seeing the invisible forces at work,
The underlying structure.
Exactly, the underlying structure that makes the visible spectacle possible, even if you never actually see the foundation. A 1-0 football match is not dull. I mean, it is a treasure trove of tactical chess and deep psychological resilience.
So true.
We are going to look at the gritty, unapologetic redemption arc of Luis Suarez. We're going to explore a mind-bending structural parallel between modern media production and sports tactics.
Which is such a wild connection, by the way. I still can't believe this lined up.
It really is. And we'll examine the stark contrast in crisis management between the two men on the touchline. And incredibly importantly, we'll dive into how the voices describing this game to millions of people were fundamentally shifting the cultural paradigm of the sport itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this specific match is the perfect case study of how, quote-unquote, ugly football can actually be structurally perfect, and how the voices describing the game were quietly making history.
It really is the perfect storm of tactics and culture.
Yeah. So to start, I want you to imagine you're standing in the Rostov Arena. It's June 20th, 2018. This isn't just any group stage match. This is Luis Suarez's historic 100th international cap for Uruguay.
Which is a massive milestone.
Oh, huge. Reaching 100 caps for your country is an incredible achievement in any era, but for Suarez, it carried this massive psychological weight. And in this specific match, he marks that centennial appearance by scoring his 52nd international goal.
And it happens fairly early on, right?
Yeah, exactly. It happens in the 23rd minute, and it completely alters the trajectory of Group A. With this single 1-0 victory, Uruguay secures 6 points in their first 2 matches.
Which guarantees their qualification.
Right. It guarantees their qualification into the knockout stages alongside the host nation, Russia, and simultaneously, it completely eliminates both Saudi Arabia and Egypt from the tournament.
But, the goal itself wasn't exactly a 30-yard screaming bicycle kick. I mean, it was the absolute definition of opportunistic.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly one for the highlight reels, was it?
Not at all. So, Uruguay wins a corner kick. The ball is whipped into the box. Saudi Arabia's goalkeeper, Mohamed Alawais, decides to come off his line to claim it.
Yeah.
And he completely misjudges the flight of the ball, misjudges his jump, and essentially just flaps at empty air.
Just a total miss.
Yeah, a complete whiff. The ball drops, and there is Luis Suarez, standing completely unmarked at the back post to just calmly tap it into an unguarded net.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to push back here.
Sure, go for it.
We're praising Suarez as this predatory genius, but watching the replay, Alawais completely whiffs on the ball. Isn't Oscar Tabarez, the Uruguayan manager, just, spinning PR for his star player when he praises this? I mean, that just looks like dumb luck to me. Why are we analyzing a tap-in?
Because elite strikers will tell you that being completely unmarked in the exact right place during a chaotic set piece is rarely an accident. I mean, it's about elite spatial awareness and, honestly, probability math.
Probability math? Really?
Yeah, think about the sensory overload of a corner kick. The penalty box is a whirlwind of pushing, shoving, tracking markers, predicting trajectories. Suarez doesn't just stand at the back post hoping the keeper misses it. He calculates the probability of an error.
So he's essentially mapping out the worst-case scenario for the defense and just deciding to live there.
Exactly. He reads the flight path of the ball better than the defenders. He finds the blind spot in the Saudi Arabian zonal marking system.
And just to clarify for everyone, a zonal marking system is what exactly?
Right, so a zonal marking system means defenders are guarding specific areas of space, not following specific players around.
Okay, got it.
So Suarez detaches himself from his marker at the precise millisecond the keeper commits to coming off his line. He places himself in the only physical location where an error can actually be capitalized on.
Wow, so the physical tap-in is easy, but the mental work is incredibly complex.
Precisely. He made the finish look simple because the complex work, the mental processing, the detachment, the anticipation, all of that happened in the 3 seconds prior to the ball arriving. That is the genius. It's statistical probability rendered as physical movement.
That completely reframes it for me. The fact that it looks so easy, so effortless, is actually the proof of the mastery. But to really understand the weight of this tap-in, we have to talk about the emotional baggage she dragged onto the pitch that day.
Oh, absolutely. The context is everything here.
Yeah, you have to rewind the tape to the previous World Cup in Brazil.
Right, because the shadows of 2014 loomed incredibly large over this 2018 campaign. In Brazil, Suarez infamously bit the Italian defender Giorgio Chiellini.
Which was just a genuinely shocking moment in world football.
It was unprecedented,
Mm-hmm.
and the fallout was catastrophic.
Yeah.
He was banned for 4 months from all football-related activity and unceremoniously sent home from the tournament in absolute disgrace.
And the reaction back home in Uruguay wasn't just disappointment, it was a feeling of profound exile. Diego Godin, the legendary Uruguayan defender, explicitly said that the entire squad felt Suarez was, quote, kicked out like a dog back in 2014.
That is such a harsh, vivid image.
That phrase is so visceral, right? You can feel the deep resentment they harbored. We all know Suarez is a controversial figure, but to his teammates, he was their guy, and they felt the global football community had treated him like an animal.
Yeah, Godin called the punishment unjust and disproportionate. And, whether you agree with that assessment or not is kind of irrelevant to the tactical outcome.
Right, because the emotion is what drove them.
Exactly. The critical takeaway from the sources is how that perceived injustice fueled a collective, burning drive for redemption within the Uruguayan camp 4 years later. They arrived in Russia with a chip on their collective shoulder the size of Montevideo.
And Oscar Tabarez, the manager, actively weaponized that resentment. He built a total siege mentality.
He absolutely did. And Tabarez knows exactly how to handle Suarez's specific psychological profile. After this match against Saudi Arabia, Tabarez praised Suarez not just for the goal, but for his psychological makeup.
What did he say specifically?
He talked about how Suarez permanently lives with pressure, how he thrives under it, and how generous he is with his work ethic for the team. He's a player who seems to require adversity, almost demanding a hostile environment, to actually find his highest gear.
To illustrate this, contrast Suarez's clinical nature in this game with his strike partner, Edinson Cavani.
Yeah, that's a perfect comparison.
Just 9 minutes before Suarez's goal, in the 14th minute, Cavani gets a brilliant opportunity. It's a half volley, a much better chance on paper than Suarez's eventual tap-in. And Cavani just skies it completely over the crossbar.
And Cavani is a world-class striker, undoubtedly.
Oh, one of the best.
Yeah.
But he was visibly struggling with the rhythm of the game. He was rushing. 9 minutes later, chaos ensues in the penalty area. The goalkeeper misses the ball, and Suarez is just, there, ice cold.
It really highlights the difference in their mental states in that specific moment.
It's like watching a movie villain who undergoes this really gritty, unapologetic redemption arc. He's not out there trying to be universally loved by the audience. He's not trying to win a popularity contest or, be the face of a slick marketing campaign. He just wants to be undeniably, ruthlessly effective.
That is the perfect way to describe him.
But making that run, anticipating that error, it requires a system that allows you to be in that spot to begin with. Which brings us to the actual geometry of the pitch. Suarez's goal was the direct result of how both of these teams physically and structurally set themselves up.
Right, let's break down those structures. Uruguay set up in a very classic, very rigid 4-4-2 formation.
Yeah.
You have 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, and 2 strikers, Suarez and Cavani leading the line.
A very traditional setup.
Very.
Oh.
And they were supported by fullbacks like Guillermo Varela and Martin Cáceres, who were tasked with holding the flanks. Now, opposing them, Saudi Arabia deployed a 4-1-4-1 formation. They had Fahad Al-Muwallad as the lone striker up front, dropping a midfielder deep to act as a pivot. with players like Hatton Bahibri cutting inside from the wing.
And their goal with that was what? To try and create numerical overloads in the center of the pitch?
Exactly, to dominate possession in the middle.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Mixed in with the pass maps and the expected goals data we were reviewing for this match, there was this completely unexpected source in our stack.
Oh, the podcast guide.
Yes. It's literally titled, How to Structure a Podcast So Well Your Rivals Will Hate You.
Which, at first glance, a manual on media production seems entirely disconnected from a World Cup tactical analysis.
Yeah.
Like, what does that have to do with football?
Completely disconnected, but the structural philosophies in this guide are eerily similar to football tactics. The guide preaches what it calls the holy trinity of structure. It says every good piece of audio needs an intro, the main content, and the outro.
Okay, makes sense.
Right, and it constantly hammers home the idea of delivering the meat and potatoes, the actual value to the listener. And most importantly, it tells creators to ruthlessly edit out ums, fluff, and what it calls dead air to respect the audience's time.
And what's fascinating is how perfectly that broadcasting framework maps onto the tactical reality of this 90-minute football match. Let's look at Saudi Arabia through that exact lens.
Let's do it.
Saudi Arabia had a fantastic intro. For the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game, they came out utilizing a mid to high press. They dominated possession. They established very compact passing structures, largely facilitated by their midfield buffer, Abdullah Otaf.
They looked incredibly polished right out of the gate.
They really did. They hooked the audience, to use the podcast term.
But then they transitioned into their main content, and they completely failed to deliver. They had vast amounts of possession, but zero end product. Their wide players, particularly on the right side with Al-Sharani and Al-Brek, got open constantly.
Yeah, they had plenty of space out wide.
But they lacked the striking partnership and the finishing tools to actually deliver the value, which in football is a goal.
Exactly. All that beautiful passing, all that possession, it was tactical dead air. It was an hour of conversational ums.
Tactical dead air. I absolutely love that framing.
Right. Because it was just nice-sounding passing sequences with absolutely no penetration into the danger zones. They passed the ball back and forth in front of the Uruguayan defense without ever asking them a truly difficult question. Activity is not the same thing as effectiveness.
That is a crucial distinction, and then you contrast that with Uruguay, who were a complete masterclass in ruthless editing. Uruguay did not care about looking flashy or entertaining for the sake of it.
Not at all.
In the first half, they allowed Saudi Arabia to have the ball. They absorbed the pressure, sitting deep in their 4-4-2. So I have to ask, if Saudi Arabia controlled the possession and essentially dictated the pace of the first quarter of the game, why didn't Uruguay panic and break their structure?
To understand why Uruguay didn't panic, imagine a boxer utilizing the rope, a dope strategy.
Like Muhammad Ali.
Exactly. You lean back on the rope to keep your guard tight, and you let your opponent throw punch after punch against your forearms. Your opponent looks like they are dominating, they're burning massive amounts of energy, but they aren't actually hurting you.
They're just wearing themselves out.
Precisely. Uruguay knew that as long as they didn't break their defensive lines, Saudi Arabia's possession was harmless. It's the difference between having the ball and knowing what to do with the ball. Uruguay had the psychological discipline to stick to their structure.
Which is a huge part of tournament football, right? Defensive solidity usually triumphs over unstructured possession.
Almost always. But in the second half, Uruguay recognized the need to actually secure the game, and they transitioned their structure perfectly. Oscar Tabarez makes a crucial substitution, bringing on Diego Laxalt for Christian Rodriguez.
And that substitution was the editing moment.
Exactly. Tabarez brings on Laxalt, and Uruguay shifts their entire passing structure. They stop sitting back and start executing their plays in deeper offensive zones, specifically targeting the left half spaces with Laxalt and Caceres.
Let's pause there, because half spaces is one of those tactical terms that gets thrown around a lot. For those visualizing the pitch on their commute right now, how does a half space actually function geometrically?
Sure. So imagine dividing the entire football field lengthwise into 5 vertical lanes. You have the 2 wide lanes by the touch lines, you have the center lane running right down the middle, and then you have the 2 lanes sandwiched in between the center and the wings.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Those 2 in-between lanes, those are the half spaces.
And why are they so dangerous? Why do modern coaches obsess over them?
Because they are a total nightmare to defend. If you attack down the wing, the defense just shifts over. It's predictable. If you attack down the middle, you run into the dense traffic of center backs.
Right, it's too crowded.
But if you put an attacking player in the half space, You force the defending team to make terrible choices. Does the fullback step inside to cover him, leaving the winger wide open on the outside? Or does the center back step out, opening up a gaping hole in the middle of the penalty area for Luis Suarez to run into?
Oh, wow. So you're putting the defense in a lose-lose situation.
Exactly. So by targeting the left half spaces with Laxalt, Uruguay bypassed the areas where Saudi Arabia wanted to comfortably hold possession, and suddenly started forcing the Saudi defenders to make those impossible decisions.
They suffocated Saudi Arabia's defensive block by keeping the ball in much more threatening areas.
And the data supports this completely.
Yeah, the pass maps back this up perfectly. Saudi Arabia's play heavily shifted to the right, doing absolutely nothing, while Uruguay's second half play aggressively shifted left. They almost grabbed a second goal when Carlos Sanchez missed a header in the 62nd minute. They just cut out the fluff and delivered the core value, the 1-0 result.
They kept the points by ensuring every action had a distinct, valuable purpose. But, executing that kind of suffocating discipline, sticking to a 4-4-2 while the other team passes around you for 20 minutes, that doesn't just happen because players want to do it.
Right, has to come from the top.
It requires a manager who completely insulates them from panic. And when you look at Oscar Tabarez on the touchline that day, you see exactly where Uruguay gets their grit.
Let's talk about Tabarez because his story is just incredible. He had been in charge of the Uruguayan national team for 12 years at this point. He literally built the modern Uruguayan football ethos from the ground up, all the way from the youth levels to the seniors.
He is a monumental figure in their sporting history.
And with this win against Saudi Arabia, he just led them to their 4th consecutive World Cup knockout phase. But the personal context is what makes Tabarez truly legendary and what makes his players run through brick walls for him.
Yeah, his personal battle during this tournament is incredibly moving.
During this 2018 tournament, he is battling chronic neuropathy. It's a severe nerve condition that severely limits his mobility. He is often unable to walk unaided, managing games while leaning heavily on a crutch or sitting on the bench.
And you can see how his personal resilience mirrors the exact identity he demands from his team. Tabarez is stoic, he is unsentimental, and he is fiercely results-oriented.
He doesn't let his physical limitations impinge on his tactical mind.
Not for a second. And in return, his team plays with a dogged determination that reflects his spirit. They are a direct reflection of their creator. Now, contrast that stoic stability with Juan Antonio Pizzi, the manager of Saudi Arabia.
Talk about a guy in the ultimate hot seat.
Seriously. Pizzi's is experiencing the World Cup from entirely opposite emotional and professional spectrums compared to Tabarez.
Pizzi's situation was incredibly volatile. He's an Argentine-born coach who only took over the Saudi national team a few months prior to the tournament. And that was after they had already parted ways with the manager who actually qualified them, Bert van Marwijk.
Right, the turnover was insane.
He's the 3rd coach in a very short span. His job is permanently on the line. And he came into this Uruguay match carrying the colossal baggage of having been thrashed 5-0 by Russia in the opening game of the entire tournament.
5-0 on opening day is a disaster.
The pressure on him to show literally any sign of competence was astronomical.
And we have to factor in the off-pitch context for the Saudi team, which honestly sounds like something out of a disaster movie.
It's unbelievable.
Just a few days before this match, while they are flying into Rostov, an engine on their plane actually catches fire mid-air.
I can't even imagine. The adrenaline dump alone would ruin you for days.
Exactly. Detail the claustrophobia and psychological terror of being on a plane, looking out the window, and seeing flames shooting out of the engine.
It's terrifying.
And you are experiencing this profound, life-threatening anxiety when you are already facing national humiliation from a 5-0 loss on the global stage. How does a manager handle the psychology of a squad that is terrified on multiple levels?
You almost can't blame them for looking a bit toothless on the pitch.
The psychological burden on Pizzi to just get these players onto the pitch and functioning was immense.
So after the 1-0 loss to Uruguay, Pizzi gives this post-mortem press conference, and he actually praises his team, which makes sense given what they'd just been through. He points out their enormous improvement from the Russia game, specifically noting their ability to retain the ball against a top-tier South American side.
Which is fair. They did hold the ball well.
But then he delivers a remarkably blunt assessment of their fatal weakness. He says, quote, "We have good ball possession, but no effectiveness." He goes on to express his deep frustration over conceding from the Suarez tap-in, calling it a random play.
And then he makes that really striking admission.
Yeah, he says they simply lack the weapons or tools to try to equalize. He basically says, look, we don't have the guys to put the ball in the net.
It's a moment of stark realism from a manager who knows his tactical system is fundamentally limited by his personnel.
But I've got to challenge Pizzi here, or at least play devil's advocate. Is it really fair for a manager to just throw his hands up and blame a lack of weapons? Isn't that a massive cop-out?
Well, depends on how you look at the job.
Because if you know you don't have a superstar striker, shouldn't you design a tactical structure that manufactures goals through movement and overloads? Was his 4-1-4-1 tactical structure just far too rigid and conservative to actually threaten Uruguay?
This gets to the absolute core difference between club management and international management. In club football, management is architectural. You have 10 months a year to drill attacking fluidity into your players.
Right, you see them every day.
Exactly. If your blueprint needs a specific type of window, you go to the transfer market and buy it. If Pizzi lacks a striker at a club, he just buys one in January.
But international football isn't architectural at all.
It's extreme crisis management. International managers are entirely hostage to the generational talent pool of their specific nation at any given moment. Pizzi only had his players for a few weeks of training camp before the World Cup.
A few weeks is nothing.
It's really not. Instilling a complex, fluid attacking system that can break down a defense marshaled by Diego Godin, I mean, that takes months, maybe years of chemistry building.
And Pizzi had 3 weeks.
Exactly. He opted to build a defensive structure that allowed them to keep the ball so they wouldn't get battered 5-0 again. The trade-off for that defensive security was offensive impotence. He didn't have the time to build both, and he certainly didn't have a Suarez to rely on for a moment of individual magic.
That really puts it into perspective. An international manager is literally constrained by the limits of a nation's youth development programs from 20 years ago.
Yep.
You're trying to survive a crisis with whatever tools are currently in the shed. But you know, while Tabarez and Pizzi were dissecting these intense realities down on the touchline, an entirely different, incredibly historic dynamic was unfolding high above them in the stadium.
The broadcast booths.
Yes.
This match and the 2018 World Cup as a whole was a massive watershed moment for the media coverage of the sport itself. We are talking about the breaking of long-standing barriers for female sports broadcasters calling the men's game.
The global lineup that was fundamentally changing the sound of football during this tournament was just staggering.
It was a huge shift.
You had Allie Wagner over in the U.S. making history, becoming the first woman ever to call a men's World Cup match on U.S. television for FOX. She brought 131 caps for the U.S. women's national team and 2 Olympic gold medals into that broadcast booth.
Talk about credentials.
Telemundo brought in Viviana Vila, an incredibly experienced Argentine journalist. In the UK, Vicky Sparks became the first woman to commentate on a live World Cup match for the BBC.
And for this specific Uruguay versus Saudi Arabia match, the airways were just full of trailblazers. The BBC Radio 5 Live setup featured Rachel Corsie, the former Scotland defender, providing a lead co-commentary alongside Casa Alam and Chris Coles.
A brilliant lineup.
And over on ITV's television coverage, you had Laura Woods fronting the presentation with deep studio analysis from former England internationals Eni Lucas, Jackie Oatley, and Seema Jaswal. And across the entire tournament, figures like Alex Scott were providing incredibly nuanced tactical breakdowns for the BBC.
It was a critical mass of female representation at the highest echelon of the sports media. But as with any major cultural shift, the pushback was swift, loud, and frankly, completely archaic.
Oh, the backlash was ridiculous.
Leanne Sanderson, herself a former professional footballer with caps for Arsenal in England, wrote a really powerful op-ed detailing the intense cultural resistance these women were facing.
Sanderson zeroes in on this bizarre, deeply entrenched idea that women somehow don't inherently understand the men's game.
Which is just wild.
It's an argument that completely ignores the fact that these women played the exact same sport on the exact same dimensions with the exact same tactical theories at the highest international levels. They didn't play a different sport, they just played it without the billion-dollar broadcasting contracts.
The specific instances of backlash we found in the sources are infuriating to look back on. There's a moment where the former French international Patrice Evra is in the studio, and he literally gives this patronizing, slow applause to Eni Lucas after she provides a very standard, highly insightful piece of tactical analysis.
Like he couldn't believe his ears.
Exactly. It was as if he was genuinely shocked a woman could read a game of football.
And then it gets even more blatant. Jason Cundy, a former player himself, went on national television in the UK and actually complained that a woman's voice, quote, hurts his ears during a football match.
I remember that. It was awful.
He tried to frame it as an auditory issue, masking his obvious bias as some sort of sensory preference.
Which Sanderson completely dismantles in her piece. She points out that the meticulous preparation, the deep research, and the charismatic delivery of broadcasters like Enia Luco, Alex Scott, and Ali Wagner were routinely outshining many of the legacy male pundits.
Because they actually did the homework.
Right. I mean, think about what a 40-year echo chamber sounds like. It's the same five guys passing the microphone back and forth, using the same tired cliches. He wanted it more. They showed great character today. It's just lazy.
And then suddenly, you introduce Alex Scott or Enia Luco into that echo chamber. They aren't relying on cliches because they literally just retired from playing at that elite tactical level. They are breaking down a low block with granular detail. They are explaining the geometry of the half spaces we talked about earlier.
They bring actual value.
It's the podcast structure analogy all over again. The female broadcasters were coming in with intensely prepared main content. They weren't relying on dead air or tired jokes. They were delivering pure tactical value to the listener. And that level of professionalism completely exposed the complacency of the old guard.
So what does this all mean? The pushback wasn't actually about the tone of their voices. The pushback was the sound of a monopoly realizing it was finally facing genuine competition. It's like an exclusive, decades-old roundtable finally opening up its microphones to new guest experts and radically improving the quality of the conversation just by altering the echo chamber.
Exactly. And the value of that competition goes way beyond just better analysis. It raises an even deeper question. How do these diverse voices actually change the tactical language and the narrative focus of the game itself?
That's a great point. Think about the lived experiences. When a female ex-international who perhaps had to fight tooth and nail for funding, basic resources, and respect during her playing career, watches a team like Saudi Arabia crumbling under pressure, or a team like Uruguay relying on pure grit, does she bring a different perspective on team cohesion?
Absolutely she does. She analyzes tactical discipline or locker room psychology completely differently than a male pundit whose career path was paved with multi-million-dollar academies from the age of 8. The vocabulary shifts. The empathy for the player's struggles shifts.
The narrative deepens.
Yeah, the appreciation for the unglamorous structural defensive work might be heightened. When you change the speaker, you don't just change the tone of voice, you fundamentally change the story being told to the audience.
Anna Kessel summed this up perfectly regarding the profound generational impact of this representation. She wrote, quote, "When boys and girls watch this World Cup and they see these amazing women on their screens, that totally changes their expectations of what women can and can't do." Blimey, that's huge.
Blimey, that's huge indeed. It reframes the entire subconscious baseline of authority for millions of young viewers. It proves that the people analyzing the geometry perfectly are more than capable of reading the blueprint.
Which brings us full circle. On paper, this was just a simple 1-0 win for Uruguay in the group stages, a game you could easily skip over and forget about. But beneath that surface, we found a really profound story today.
It really did.
We've seen the predatory statistical instinct of Luis Suarez securing his redemption. We've seen the undeniable triumph of Uruguay's rigid 4-2 structure over Saudi Arabia's aimless dead air possession. We saw Tabaraloz's incredible personal resilience contrasting with Pithi's crisis management. And we witnessed a massive cultural leap forward in how the world listens to the sport, driven by a vanguard of fiercely prepared female broadcasters.
If there is a single thread tying all of these diverse elements together, it is the concept of structure.
Structure really is the key.
Structure is the invisible scaffolding that creates lasting success. It's Oscar Tabarez's unyielding defensive block absorbing pressure without panic. It's the meticulous layout of a well-edited presentation delivering non-stop value. And it's the intense structural preparation of trailblazing broadcasters like Alex Scott and Enia Luco that allowed them to shatter glass ceilings with undeniable expertise.
So to you, the listener, think about your own workflows today. Think about the projects you are managing right now. Where is the dead air? Where are you passing the ball sideways just to look busy? Find the aimless possession in your workflow and ruthlessly edit it out. Trust your structural blueprint, just like Uruguay did, to secure your progression.
And as we close the book on this match, consider the natural evolution of what we saw in those broadcast booths. We watched an echo chamber shatter, and the quality of the conversation improved dramatically because of it.
And it leaves you with one final lingering question. As the voices narrating our global events become increasingly diverse, profoundly changing the stories we hear, how long will it be before the managers standing on the touchlines of the Men's World Cup begin to reflect that exact same diversity?
It's a matter of time.
Right. If women like Ellie Wagner and Ini Aluko can decode the complex tactics perfectly from the broadcast booth high above the stadium, when will we finally see them dictating those tactics from the dugout down on the pitch? Keep looking for the invisible forces at work.